My last, most recent YouTube piece was on David Madden, and both my sister and I and my father were frequently in New York City, because my father came up every year to make engagements for soloists such as Rubinstein, violinists like Riccardo Ricci, pianists like Rudolf Fukushny, great pianist, and Lily Krauss. And he would, for his symphony concerts, he would, one of the main ways that he attracted an audience and kept the performance center in Knoxville full and good subscriptions every year was to hire very famous artists. And so to accomplish that, he had to spend at least a week in New York every autumn. I think he went up every year in the autumn, October or something like that, before the first concert. And he often met with Ray Green, who had an organization called the American Music Center, and he was married to a dancer named I'm trying to remember her name. Ray Green wrote a wonderful symphony called Spring Symphony, which my father recorded in Frankfurt. Came out on CRI, beautiful, beautiful piece. Very, very original and full of wonderful light and gaiety and glorious feelings of springtime coming. And I mean, it just rings with joy. And he was quite an inventor. Her name was May O'Donnell, and she had a beautiful dancer. She was a beautiful woman. I mean, Ray Green is very much in the Irish tradition, and all his Irishness comes out in a wonderful way. My father did a great job conducting that, recording that symphony of Ray's. And you often see Ray Green, and an old friend, greatest horn player in America at the time. And a good composer too. Barrows, John Barrows. The best recordings ever of his wonderful chamber music for horn, such as a Brahms piece, and also trying to remember others, was recorded on Emerson, which had the best sound of any long playing records. A close friend of my father's, his wife Pat. We used to meet at their place often in the village. We go down, and Pat, John's wife, and my father would always make it out French kissing. I mean, it was really something. Great friends. And John Barrows was a part of the Woodward Quintet, which toured 46 countries, sent by Nelson Rockefeller in the State Department, a cultural exchange. And along with, in fact, every member of the quintet was also a composer. there was a California 12-tone composer named Weiss, then an oboist, Alvin Etler, who taught at Amherst College, I believe, and he was also a composer. John Barrows, and there was another American composer, I forget his name, who sort of wrote in a sort of jazz style. I don't believe that was John Barrows, but he was the kind of horn player I emulated when I was playing French horn. I mean, he really was a great horn player. Otto Weiss, I think, was the 12-tone composer and member, and a bassoonist, and a member of the woodwind quintet, who was on the trip. I don't know who the clarinet was. Alvin Etler was the oboist. And I've talked to people about the quintet in years since, and people know all those people. I mean, they're well-known musicians to many people in America who, or for me, were aware of what was going on in the 40s. I mean, the year was 1944. They toured 16 countries, 46. They had 46 performances. I don't know how many countries. I mean, they went to every Latin American country. And my grandfather, who was a member of this club in San Francisco that met out in the wild, I forget the name of that. He met a lot of very important people like George Schultz who were leaders of industry. Some of them made ambassadors. And through my grandfather, John Presley Landry, J.P. Landry, my grandfather's friend from this club, men's club, that would meet out in the wild, I think very famous writers. Father was also a member of that club. And my uncle, George McClay, who was administrative dean of the School of Music at Northwestern and a great organist. And was a part of that group of people who lived in my grandparents' house, or their apartment. George McClay was an illegitimate child from Wyoming who went to Northwestern and was a musician and lived in the sort of bed and breakfast that my grandparents, May and David Ellsworth Van Vactor, operated while my father was going to Northwestern. And my father's lover, Lydia, was one of them in one of those cubicles that my grandfather fabricated in the spaces, giving a place for a bed, a desk, and a bureau. And of course, they shared the bathroom down the hall. And Lydia would have to wait my father to get him up to get down to his delivery truck so he could deliver baked goods. And she'd say, "You're going to be late for your trigonometry class," because he had to take all these math and science courses for his pre-med degree. And unfortunately, too poor to go to medical school. What a different life he'd had if he'd become a doctor, a physician. Not necessarily a better life, but he would have been very more powerful because prosperous. He would have been a terrific GP, a general practitioner. He had the real touch I mean, whenever I had a bad injury, or cut or something that might have needed stitches, I mean, he'd put on Band-Aids and whatever, disinfectant or, methylate or something like that. And he did it with such incredible grace and to make you, no matter how, in what pain you were, you would have this feeling, this real comforting confidence in his administrations. Anyway, so Liddy would say, Glenn, I think she probably called him, or Dave, got to get up, you're late for your geometry, or your trigonometry class. So off you go. And such was the life at their wonderful B&B in Evanston. And George McClay was a part of that, and apparently very suave, beautifully dressed. He wasn't as tall as my grandfather, but he was a good-sized fellow, a handsome guy, and a wonderful man. I really loved him, my Uncle George. And his son, John McClay, got some of the manufacturer height. And we used to do my regime to practice getting ready for football season at Lawrenceville, in the park across from where they lived in Evanston. And George and Evelyn McClay, and my cousin, their daughter Lynn, who married a fellow named Lammy, and have been living in Florida for years and years. And anyway, John McClay would watch me practice and do my sprints and get into formation and run through the plays I remembered. And he was all-state center for Evanston High School, and ended up becoming a psychologist in one of the largest churches in America, in Minneapolis. And he got divorced from his first wife. I don't know if they had children together, but he married another woman who did have children. And I remember the last time talking to him out there, because one of my other cousins, Anna Catherine's daughter, whose name is Koch, often is in touch with me at holiday season. And so her brother's name is Walter David, W.D. Malloy. Her father was a fantastic basketball player at Argus High School, and a great hero of my father's, who's also played basketball. But Malloy, I think, worked for U.S. Steel in Pittsburgh, and he came to Knoxville to see my parents, and still grieving for his wife, Anna Catherine, who died of cancer, as did Evie, both at the age of 52 years old. So that's where the genes of the susceptibility to cancer comes from. I do have that in my genes. I got tongue cancer, not from smoking, passive smoke. If anything, maybe just general pollution in our environment with all the PVCs in the earth. And fortunately, I was cured. Never had to go back for another follow-up checkup at Massachusetts General Hospital by C.C. Wong, who was head and neck oncology, professor of oncology at Harvard Medical School, or Davy is. And anyway, that was a traumatic period for my father, seeing both his beloved sisters die of cancer. And he went to see Anna Catherine in Pittsburgh, and then he saw Evie in the hospital, and after which he wrote elegy movement of his symphony listed as his third symphony. Actually, it's his first symphony, which was performed by Willem Steinberg in Pittsburgh when I was in my junior year at Harvard. And I went to the concert, as did his best student of composition and wonderful composer, Gilbert Kreisel, whose first symphony my father did an LP of, a long-playing record of, with a Ford Foundation grant. Gunther Schuller was in that series with his sketches on the art of Paul Klee, a series of pieces, beautiful pieces. But Gilbert's first symphony is magnificent. There was also another symphony by John Boda, and wonderful series of recordings my father made, and those came out on long playing record. The reason my sister was in New York was because she was going to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and she met Riva Boren, at that time Riva Borenstein, at the San Remo bar, because Jerry had met her there, and called Raven about Riva, and my sister went and met her there with Jerry, and fell in love with her. I mean, I was in love with Riva for years, and it was a very hard lesbian relationship, gay relationship, because Riva had a kind of mean streak. I'm sorry to say. I mean, this isn't what I'm going to now tell is maybe not appropriate for people who are under, for children to hear. Children should not hear none of the stories I'm about to tell. It's about, on my part, it would be adultery in Christian or Mosaic terms, and I would try to be as discreet as I can in the way I tell this story. Now, Riva Boren family, mother, father, and brother, were in a concentration camp, and she managed to escape, but only by being able to kill one of the guards. How she did that, I do not know, but she did escape from the camp and got somehow back to Paris, where she'd grown up, and she had maiden aunts in Brooklyn, whom she visited sometimes. So that's probably why she was down in the village on Bleecker Street at San Remo's, a bar I knew also. Actually, saw somebody murdered right outside. I was with Walton Litz and John Silver, my English teacher from Lawrenceville, who'd gone to Princeton and knew Walt Litz, who later became chairman of the English department. I saw later was Ted and Renee Weiss, because Renee played in a trio. She's a terrific musician, a violinist, part of the great family, the Carroll family of Philadelphia region. They were from Allentown, Pennsylvania, and one of her relatives is Charles Rosen, the great musicologist and writer on his terrific book about the classic style is still important to people. And her sister Rosalind, who's a terrific artist, was married to Theodore Weiss, who with his wife Renee founded a quarterly review of literature and edited and published it for years. I mean, the two of them working hand in hand, just fabulous things that they did. I mean, they did a great poet that actually John Ashbery wrote about in his Charles Eliot Norton lectures in a book. Trying to think of the man's name. I mean, they did a whole series of his letters, and that was a book in its own right. But Ted and taught Pat at Bard Shakespeare. In fact, she was sort of the star of his seminar because she had a memory of texts. I mean, it was not just a short-term memory, but she could come into the seminar and quote whole scenes from something like Twelfth Night. And Ted wrote a wonderful book on Shakespeare. He taught at Yale and after Bard, and then ended up at the place that Einstein ended up at, the Institute in Princeton. Let me go on with my story about Riva Bourne, and who after she got back to Paris, having maybe just been in New York City, probably in Brooklyn, visiting her maiden aunts, she came back to Paris and ended up marrying Jacques Lanceman. Now, the Lancemans were a very interesting family. Claude Lanceman, it was a journalist, and in fact, I read a lot about his memoirs that he published about a year and a half ago. It was in a lot of, in the Le Monde, on their cultural pages, long reviews of it. Maybe the reviews were in Paris Match, I'm not sure where I read it, but he had been a rather charismatic kid. And in fact, somebody, a friend of the family or somebody, had gotten him to some rather well-known prostitute. And apparently he was so athletic that in the way he made love to this woman, it impressed everybody. And then he went on to make Shoah, which is the most important piece of documentary television on the Holocaust. I mean, 7 hours. I mean, anybody who is a devout religious Jew who wants to complete the mourning and the memorial of this horrendous event that took place at Auschwitz and in other places like Dachau. I mean, one of my best friends, Jean Chambon, a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, his father died at Dachau. He grew up in the Auvergne, and at any rate, Jacques Lanceman's mother was, I think, had these two extraordinary, gifted boys, Claude and Jacques. Now, Jacques, at the age of, I think, 15, started doing oil painting and probably abstract. I mean, he had a huge success as a teenager, and a lot of shows and galleries and sales. And then their sister, whose name I don't know, a very beautiful blonde, was in one of Jean-Paul Sartre's plays, No Exit, which I saw with her in it. And both Jacques and Riva joined the Communist Party, and they would meet every Tuesday at the Café Select. All of the people who were members of this group of Reds would wear red shirts to the Café Select. House wine was Muscadet, and Riva lived in this little hotel next door to, or just down the street about one building, which was a hotel that was a whorehouse. And this is the red light district, really, on Riva, right up from the Rond-Point on Boulevard Raspail. The Rond-Point is on the corner of Montparnasse and Raspail. And so every week they would be there, and at the Select for these political meetings. And I was getting interested in politics, reading up on the Russian Revolution. I remember one time I came back one summer, and I made a pass at her the year before, but I sort of must have something was registered in her mind. So one night I was talking, having gone to all of Paul Tillich's lectures and heard about his he read Marx very seriously, and he had lots of things to say, and I did the whole sociology of the burghers and so on. And I was holding forth to Riva and a young friend of hers who was probably about 19. I was about 18 at the time. And when I made this pass at her, she said, "What, are you kidding?" And humiliating. But she was very impressed with what I was talking about. I was very articulate about Marxism. And as a Harvard student, I think it was in my after my freshman year, I've been in Frankfurt, Germany, with a German tutor and a beautiful girl who was tied up in love with some Italian Gianni and not interested in me at the age of 18 or 19. But I was back in Paris, having gone with a black friend, an Andover graduate I knew in my freshman year, named Gregson. We hitchhiked down to south of France, Saint-Tropez, and we'd be waiting on the roads for hours. And finally a beautiful Citroën pulled up. One douche-bow, the Citroën, which is a rather flimsy car with a canvas top and body, could hardly get up the hill. It just, as it was going up a long hill, it was just getting weaker and weaker. The gears, bop, bop, bop. We felt like we had to get out and push to get all the way up to this hill. But then the next time we got out, had our thumbs out, a Citroën pulled up a sedan, and we had comfortable seats, and we made, we probably covered about 400 miles. But usually when we get picked up, it only go for maybe 10 kilometers, and then we're out. People would arrive where they wanted to be. They'd have to let us out. And then we were, have to wait. I had this little flimsy cardboard suitcase carrying my stuff, and we ended up, my friend, my chum, Grayson, he'd come from Washington. He grew up in Washington. I think his father ran a racetrack or something. I think he became a very successful businessman after he graduated. And we in Saint-Tropez were trying to make some connection with women, and ended up sleeping in the front seat of a truck parked out in a field, and really cold. Got up, got down to one of the cafes and had breakfast, and then we were probably off, got the train back to Paris. Anyway, I arrived back in Paris and called up Riva, and she came over and looked at some of my artwork and made some comments and so on. Because I'd gone to her studio at the Grand Chaumier when I was 15 years old, and I'd done my drawing for 4 or 5 hours, a lot of models there every day at the Grand Chaumier. Still going on to this day, just like that. You pay a little fee to get into the gallery where you can find a place to put your artwork, a table or some place to perch yourself and on a stool and draw while the duration of the models naked, nude, posing. Did some of my best drawings there. It's really one of the places I learned to draw. But I did go up to Riva's studio, having come over. We were staying in the Continental Hotel. It was a beautiful place. I used to try to do it more frugally, cheaply, although I had quite a bit of money at that time from money my grandparents had left me for my education. I received about $13,000 a year, paid for all law school and Harvard tuition, and all my travel on that, and saved about $40,000. I mean, until I bought my own house, my first house in Newton Highlands, for $44,000. Anyway, back to Riva. So I would go up to Riva's studio, and I remember one time she put a vase on the table and wanted me to try a still life, and I got out my pen and drew it, and then she suggested maybe some colors, and I did it. One of my first still lifes was her in her presence, and then we make out. I loved the beautiful women I met through my sister, some of her actress friends like Anne de Chantal. I would, love to French kiss me. I mean, there's somehow women who are about early 20s or 19 or something like that. A good-looking boy, 15 to 16, 18, for some reason has attraction to them. And I was very lucky. I mean, I got lucky, very lucky. I was very, very spoiled by it. And so I'd be making out with Riva in her studio. I mean, for a long time I've been attracted to her. And she was a very beautiful woman, very tall. She must have been about almost 5'11", at least 5'10". She was 28, I was 20. And so she and Jacques had a child, Dimitri, properly with all their communist leanings. They had chosen a Russian name, and Jacques had just gotten through a 5-book contract with Riva, having published his first novel after his short adolescent career as a painter. He said to me, I stopped at a certain point. I had a lot of success, but he said I had no more to say in painting. So then he started writing novels, and he wrote a novel that Juilliard published, and then he got a 5-book contract, and one of the first things he did was to go to Moscow, and write a book about that trip. And so he was away from his wife and child, Mitya, called Mitya, and um, went and wrote a book about Moscow. I think even a visit to a whorehouse in Moscow was in that book. And I remember there was a party that Juilliard gave for him, and a funny story, they were passing around this silver bowl full of ice cream, and they had, it was a kind of formal dinner banquet for their writers and maybe some critics, and there were finger bowls. So here comes the waiter bringing around, offering this bowl full of ice cream, and Jacques takes this big scoop, and what does he do? He plops it in his finger bowl. And that was a funny story. I mean, he had a great sense of humor. And my mother, father, and Raven and Riva drove in a Simca that they bought. My parents always bought a car in Paris when they came over in the summers, and then they'd sell it back to the company they bought it from instead of renting a car. So they drove this car for 14 weeks all over Spain, going to bullfights. My father was an absolute Hemingway maniac, and so he was, going. They did a full tour of Spain. My father was bilingual and spoke perfect Spanish, having done a lot of time conducting and teaching in Santiago de Chile. And in 1945, when I was there for 6 months as a 7-year-old kid, and having come to, we started out, I believe, in New Orleans. We went to Panama, and then a 6-hour trip by plane. Landed one night in, going to Guatemala, to Peru, and one night it was a 6-hour or 6-day flight on a small a prop plane from Panama to Santiago de Chile, and I had a fantastic time in Santiago. I learned Spanish, and we had friends who had this great ranch on a lake called Acaleo, right up in the mountains, with the Andes in sight. And this is this is the farm of Alfonso Letelier, who was a very good composer, a close friend of my father's. And he had a kind of vision like Levin in Anna Karenina. I mean, he had all the people who worked on his farm on the lakes there, like called Acaleo. He built for them hospitals, libraries. I mean, there was a vision of the peasant workers, farmers, that was enlightened, very much as is expressed by Levin in Anna Karenina. And I think it was his either his brother or first cousin, Orlando Letelier, who was assassinated in Washington during the El Salvador period. Reagan's intervention in Central American politics in the time of the death squads in El Salvador. Anyway, that night that I spoke so impressively about what I'd learned from Paul Tillich at Harvard my first year, going every noon to hear or every day at 11 o'clock before lunch to hear Paul Tillich lecture. It was a rare occasion which I did not miss one of the lectures. It was a little bit hard to understand because of his German accent, but very articulate and brilliant about politics and modern culture. It was just an extraordinary experience. So anyway, I guess it sort of impressed Riva, and so we went and she cooked a dinner for Mitya and me, and so we were back at her apartment, and so then she sort of said, after putting Mitya to bed, and I'd been carrying him around, and we'd been walking all over. She lived on Rue de la Boucherie, right around the corner from, not far from where we had an apartment on Rue de Ma, in the 6th arrondissement near Place Maubert. It was right around the corner from Rue Colbert, where Pat and I had stayed after we'd been given free beds at Shakespeare and Company because we were giving readings. I had readings from my novel, and also Pat read from her Lady Dentist Takes a Look, which is a chapter from her novel Other Women, or The Return, I think it's now called. And then, so I think it was 5 Rue de la Boucherie where Jacques and Riva lived. And one time I came to see Jacques, and he had a woman up there who was making love to, and he's sweating. He's a redheaded, very handsome guy. Really got along with my father. My father liked him a lot. And so, I mean, here, my mother and father had ridden around all over Spain with Riva and Raven in the car. And my sister would not tolerate going to bullfights. She hated that. But they went to a lot of bullfights and had a lot of paella and terrific time down there. And I had been in Scotland with my history teacher, Catherine Moore, who was in the violin section of my father's orchestra, and had spent a Fulbright year in Inverness. We went back to see the doctor's family she lived with that year on her Fulbright in a town called Bewley, and the lord of the land was Lord Lovett, and in fact there was a Lovett green, and I got a sweater, beautiful wool sweater with this orange and blue woven together that produced a kind of green called Lovett green. I met Lord Lovett, and we were invited to all the families of the children that Catherine had taught the year before. And I mean, I'd never eaten such tea cakes in my life. It was the most exquisite thing, you know. So then I had brought my golf clubs, and I went and played 5 golf courses, taking the bus around to different links. And I went to one school, and they were playing field hockey. I didn't play it, but this nice kid gave me his tartan pants, beautiful, beautiful pants that I had to use with suspenders, and it had a kind of high back at the seat of the pants that came up and over, and so I didn't beat the pants off him, but he gave me his wool pants, and they were absolutely beautiful. I had loved wearing those for years, and had fun playing all the golf up there. I mean, it was a memorable time. But Catherine and I went down to Edinburgh, and then we finally got down to London, and we took a plane down to Barcelona. And that's how I was reunited with my sister and my parents. And my father had just come back from his concert in London, conducting the London Philharmonia, which had been arranged by his manager, Frieda Roth, in Amsterdam. And he played a romantic program, Tchaikovsky Fourth, Chausson Symphony, Liszt piano concertos with Robert Kosadzu, and I always said that what he should have done was play his Symphony in D, which won the New York Philharmonic Prize and got terrific. I mean, one of his best pieces. It's on CD now, and he instead of playing other people's music, he should have played his own music. And if he'd done that with such a great symphony orchestra, he would have just probably had a fantastic career and been played by other conductors and major symphony orchestras in Europe and Germany or Italy and maybe again played in London, either the London Philharmonic, which forget who's the conductor now, and Andre Previn is the conductor of that orchestra. I don't know who's conducting the Philharmonic at the moment, but it's probably always been the best symphony orchestra in Europe. Maybe better than the Berlin Philharmonic, maybe better than the Vienna Philharmonic. I just don't know. These are just all opinions. But anyway, so after we'd fed Mitya and he'd gone to bed, Riva and I had a cigarette sitting over on her bed, and Mitya stopped asking her to come in and read him a story, and she sort of gives me the wink and is basically saying, why don't we get it on? And as they say, the kids slang. So we were smoking a Gauloise, I believe. She smoked a lot. I didn't really smoke very much, or very rarely. Or if I did, I smoked an aromatic cigarette like Abdullah or Balkan Sobhani. We'd had wine for dinner, so we were, and a nice dinner, a steak and something else. And so here was one of the most beautiful women I'd ever known. So beautiful with her black hair. She let her hair down. I mean, my father told me that when she came into his room on their tour of Spain, she let her hair down, and as if something might happen, giving him an opening. But my mother was right in the next down the hall. No way he was going to do anything with her. But though he was attractive, I think, to her. And neither my mother or father had any idea that my sister was in love with her. And Riva could be rather mean to my sister. Once, after she'd had a mastectomy and a cancer, and she talked about herself as being like one of the Amazons from Lesbos. They removed a breast so they were better art. It was easier for them to be archers. And she visited my sister in Los Angeles at Bedford, her house on Bedford Street, and there was a kind of reunion and reconciliation, and Riva was. It was something that meant a lot to my sister. I went to see Riva with my wife, Patricia. She was living in one of those great buildings with a huge studio window that the city of Paris provided for artists. She had been teaching at the American University, and I brought some of my drawings. She was very contemptuous. She said, that's not the way to preserve your drawings. You should have them in a portfolio, and you should have them better arranged in a better order if you're going to show them to somebody. She was very, very chiding, and but I mean, she was an art teacher, so actually it was good advice. And from then on, I did always use better paper, and I was very careful to preserve them so they wouldn't get damaged or creased or wrinkled. And anyway, so I was nuts about this woman. And sort of the height of my youth and vigor, and having been a wrestler and a football player, and had very, very powerful relationships with some people, such as my girlfriend in Knoxville, who will remain nameless. At any rate, I made love to Riva about 7 times. I mean, and I talked to her about it later. I tried to call her after I got back at 5 in the morning at my hotel, the Hotel de Versailles in Riva, and walking up Rue de Rennes from Rue de la Boucherie, the left bank, and I called Riva, and she really she didn't want a repeat of the lovemaking. Obviously, she was doing something else. I don't know, probably having to do with her son and her responsibilities. And she had a career as a painter, doing some wonderful work. We bought several of her paintings. My parents, my father bought a couple. A beautiful one of the beach, because she and Jacques would go down to Ramatuelle and the wonderful beach near Saint-Tropez, and for their August holiday. And one time we met them in Ramatuelle, and she did a beautiful, beautiful painting on Noel, on about the bathers and in their little kind of tents that they put on the beach there, and I said something about how terrific it was to be with her, and she said, well, I was a little disappointed. I expected much more from somebody your age. Well, the next thing I knew, I got back to after my parents had been using, mother had been using my Thunderbird. I'd sent it over to Antwerp from Boston, and then had to take it once I got it back to Paris. It was very hard to find parking in Paris. My parents had come through looking for me, not to be found, still getting back to Paris from Saint-Tropez, and finally, Louis, the man at the Hotel de Versailles, who was a Second World War veteran, come from Indiana, my father's state, birthplace. He had no idea where I was. The young friend from Harvard, freshman year classmate Grayson, come looking for me, but I was all wrapped up in Riva, and so finally I took my Thunderbird out to Antwerp and sent it back to Boston, and went back to the U.S. by plane, and finally down to Knoxville. And then, lo and behold, when I was down there, I think in October, visiting my parents, my mother had gotten a letter from Riva saying that she had gotten pregnant and needed an abortion. Could she send $600? I wish that she had written to me, because I had actually that kind of money in the bank. I would have sent it immediately, but I mean, it's sort of, I'm thinking that maybe I have a Jewish child, half brother of Mitya, and that this child was denied life. Like the child my father might have had with Lydia, another brother I never had, or sister. I don't know what Lydia and my father would have produced, but probably a beautiful child. All children to me are beautiful, and I really believe that when these things happen, one should go ahead and let this child live. And in the case of my sister, when she got pregnant with a friend and had to have an abortion, I think it was the biggest mistake of her life. She should have had that child. It would have been a brilliant child and made every difference in her life. I just don't believe in abortion. It's not absolutely necessary. Sometimes for health reasons it is, or if there's been rape or incest, whatever. But it's and that remark that it sort of made me feel justified. That remark that I hadn't done it as many times as she might have expected, or however she put it, or some kind of disappointment. I felt, well, I've gotten even with her now. You know, if it wasn't vast for her enough, at least she knew that I was a potent guy, and so I mean I was sort of proud of that in a way. Uh, uh, and I mean, my mother never really acknowledged this. So you got Riva pregnant, you know? Do you know how to use birth control? I mean, I don't know what my mother would have said if she'd really confronted the issue, but she did not send $600, I don't think. She may have said she just didn't have it, or why should she be asked to do that? I mean, she wasn't that kind of friend. She wasn't a close friend of Riva's. I mean, she obviously saw my father's attraction to Riva when they were in such close company on that trip around Spain, and she had to observe that. And I mean, an interesting follow-up to this is that my father had been writing a Christmas cantata, which was called The New Light, and they were going and hearing a lot of flamenco music, and some of the soprano soloist singing was really in that style. A lot of sort of North uh, North African, Moroccan sounding uh, style of singing, and he was just working all summer on that trip, writing that music every day in the early mornings when he'd get up and after having something to eat, start writing music. And had finished that cantata, and I think it just wrapped it up and expressed it airmail back to Knoxville, and he was afraid of losing it. And anyway, and I think he, because of their travel and everything, he was needing to just get away from the distaff, the women, my sister and my mother, and he after dinner went out up to Pigalle to some bar and buying probably drinks for girls, and there was some post-war GIs who were hung around after the war. They saw him, and you know, making time with these girls in the bar, maybe buying drinks for them, whatever. And probably he'd had a lot to drink. But anyway, they waited for him outside. They lay for him, and they were going to roll him. So he had to fight for his life, and he ended up. I mean, I saw him with a bad hangover, with a big bruise on his nose. They didn't break his nose, and his knuckles bruised and you know and scraped from hitting them. And the way he fended these assailants off was by standing and just sticking his foot straight out. He's a very strong man, and you'd probably kick him in the nuts. And he took out several of them, actually knocked them out, knocked them down, knocked them out, and received this one blow on his nose. Fortunately, it didn't break his nose, or it didn't split his lip, which would have been a disaster for his flute playing. And his fingers, or break his fingers for his flute playing. Anyway, that was an incredible moment where I saw how much he was a survivor, and nobody was going to screw with him and try to, you know, beat him up and rob him without taking you know, getting a little taste of what they deserved. But I remember sitting there. He was very, very depressed, and had this kind of morbid worry that he's going to lose piece, this piece of music he so valued. I mean, it turned out to be an absolutely beautiful piece. It was recorded and then published, the whole score of New Light, one of his best pieces of music. I mean, one of his many choral works, the Walden Symphony, the episodes Jesus Christ, a text that my sister and I put together for him, and I had taken the best lines from Henry David Thoreau's Walden and written them out, and so the Fourth Symphony, the Walden Symphony, is dedicated to me. It's a beautiful piece of choral music, choral and orchestra music. The choir, the Maryville College Choir, which Harry Harder conducted, and then another conductor conducted the orchestra that was sort of ad hoc put together for the performance, which was at the Bijou Theater, where Jerry Mann's novel Bijou, when he was an usher there for years, as a poor boy from Lonsdale. So great novel, the Bijou, and that was the venue of the Knoxville Symphony for years before it started giving concerts in their college gym, and then later had the Knoxville Performance Center for all the concerts. And so, I mean, to finish up, it was Jacques and Riva. Jacques Lansman became editor of Louis, which was a literary magazine like as good or better than Playboy, which Robbie Macaulay had edited. Who had known Jerry. He'd been, when Jerry was at the Kenyon College, at the Kenyon Review, Robbie Macaulay was editor, and then from that he went to Playboy. From Playboy, as editor of Playboy, he then was editor-in-chief of Houghton Mifflin, and where I met with him once trying to get a job there. And this is the time when we were publishing Canto. Robbie's wife, Pamela Pater, was on our editorial board for a while, and then I heard later that Robbie Macaulay was a CIA agent working for the Fairfield Foundation, which was run by one of my editorial assistants, Roger Platt, his father, who actually had invited me to meet him at the Century Club to talk about something I was thinking of doing with another friend, a national book review. And what we talked about that was Roger Platt's father, and later you read in Pay the Piper about how the Fairfield Foundation funneled CIA money through Nicholas Nabokov and others to promote big expositions of abstract painting. Now, the reason it was funding abstract painting is that you could not, in an abstract painting, have what Diego Rivera did in that big mural in Rockefeller Center, putting John D. Rockefeller in the painting, in this big mural painting, as you know, in the place of maybe where Lenin should have been. You couldn't depict anything of a political nature in an abstract expressionist painting. So they were funding abstract expressionist paintings 12-town music concerts in Europe and trying to show that American cultural, original cultural masters were as important as anything coming out of Soviet Union. All right, so there's a propaganda using the arts for cultural, for political objectives. The book Pay the Piper is a very interesting book and definitely worth reading. And in fact, my ex-wife knew the woman who wrote it, and I think her mother has they're English Catholics, and her mother has a big mansion up in Scotland, similar to the Charles Jacques and Maggie Kessick's mother's huge mansion in Scotland, on the estate of which Charlie Jacques constructed this extraordinary series of earthworks and gardens that had a 5-page spread in the New York Times Magazine, one of the most extraordinary pieces of landscape architecture done by anybody. And he collaborated on another one with Gary, who did the great auditorium in Los Angeles, and also the art museum in Bilbao, Spain. And Charlie Jacques was in my class at Harvard, good friends he was actually at Brooks School, a wrestler, a varsity wrestler as I was, and an architectural historian who invented the term postmodern, and there was written many books. But these works, original works of him, in which he collaborated. At the Getty Museum was another landscape architectural garden with Gary, are very, very important works and extremely interesting to me. Actually, we have a garden right, I have the window right now that I'd like to put something of architecture. I'd love to have teepees down there. And I want to do something rather ambitious we have these huge linden trees that are very tall and their trunks are about 3 feet in diameter. I mean, they're very old ancient trees, and they're very tall, and a lot of the branches are about to fall off, maybe getting rotten, but we have no tree man to get up there to prune them. And they make terrific tree houses. I'd love to design a tree house, a set of tree houses. There are about 7 of them right on the edge of this ridge, which it falls straight off down about 800 feet down to a field at the bottom of it where there are cows and sometimes horses and some grasses growing. But I'm afraid that after the glaciers have melted and some of these rivers will be flooded with seawater, the tides will come in and that whole valley will fill up with water. We won't be able to get to Pont l'Evêque to go shopping unless we can go by boat. And surely nothing will grow in seawater, land soaked with seawater. So we're looking forward to. That's what the future of lots of flooding in both Holland and all the major cities, like New York City, Paris, London, where the Thames estuary will be flooded cities, unless we build the dikes and prepare for this, or get some canvas covered, rubber coated boats without boards to go down like the Paris police have on the Seine between the Ile Saint Louis and the Riva and the quays. Anyway, this is the end of my story about Riva, and I would recommend anybody take a look at the book by Claude Lanzmann, his memoir, and his major contribution to documentary history of the Holocaust show is the most important work done on it, and a brilliant piece contribution to history. 7-hour work, the whole collection. I mean, any Jewish child who's being educated about history should own that. A great Bas Mitzvah or Bar Mitzvah present. Everybody should have it in their library. Very, very important work. Anyway, one of the things that Jacques did when he was editor of Riva is that he got some Western saddles and boots, and he rode horses down from Paris to the south of France. And he would do these kind of things, and he got a huge amount of publicity. And he was a very, very handsome man, a redhead, and very athletic. And then he, at the end of his life, he started taking these huge treks in the Himalayas, in Tibet, walking trips. And Riva went on some of those trips and started doing artwork of the Tibetan people, like the monks, the Dalai Lamas, monks, and doing it on very rough materials, commercial, industrial wrapping materials for heavy equipment. It's a kind of fabric that's very rough, and it's indestructible. I mean, she did a whole book on that, which I brought to my sister once, that she had given me. I mean, wonderful things from her Tibetan trips. She would do these treks, not with Jacques, but separate from him, and produce all this wonderful art on these very, very heavy, like, you know, a little bit like gunny sacks, or the kind of thing, if you put good oil paint on it, it would be indestructible. I mean, they were very colorful, wonderful colors, extreme originality. I mean, this is a kind of an apotheosis, an ultimate finale to her work, and highly original, beautiful book was produced from reproductions of these pieces, so that's my Riva and Jacques story. The Lanzmann family. Claude Lanzmann's work should be definitely followed. His memoirs are, I think, it would be a terrific book to read. But everybody should know, show, or own it. Can be owned. I now finish my as raconteur of the day, and the story of me, Raven, and Riva Bornstein. She changed her name to Riva Born, and this is a high point in my erotic life, and no shame, but no pain. Happy memories of the whole thing, of the positive and the negative of it. Nothing hurts. In retrospect, it's just a joy to remember my youthful flings, and you know, this spreading of, you know, sowing wild oats is what it is. And it's amusing to me. It's part of the comedy of life, isn't it? So go joyfully into that good night. Amen. Good story, I think. Thank you. Okay, back to work.